Hi YouTube, I'm back. I actually had a few spare moments today, so I decided that I would use them in order to record another video, because I don't know the next time that I'll have any spare moments, so I thought this would be a good time to work in another video to complement the introduction. I think I was trying to decide what I wanted to do today, and I think one of the most basic things that I could start to talk about, if I'm going to be talking about methods in relation to tarot, is the use of journaling, because I think that journaling is one of the most foundational and important things that a person can do in establishing their own relationship to tarot cards, and in kind of working out their own system and their own ideas, because it's very hard to keep track of an entire system in your head, especially when you're learning and kind of ferreting out what you believe and what you don't believe. A journal can be a good way of doing that. Different people journal in different ways, so I thought what would be useful for this video is to show you how I journal, and then maybe it would help anyone who's watching come up with their own ideas, or at least even augment the ideas that they already have. A couple of people, I've seen people who have journals which are just one gigantic tome of information. Everything is kept in one place. And this can be maybe on a blog, or it can even be in relation to like a 3-ring binder, which they slip sheets of paper in and out of, sometimes in those nice little plastic protective sheets and sometimes not. And those are very useful in the sense that you can arrange and rearrange and add in pages where you didn't have pages before, for example. I don't really use that system just because it doesn't work for me very much, but I do keep my ideas spread across a number of different journals. I find it's helpful to me if they are kept in different places and different journals have different uses, and so that's what I'm going to talk about today. The first journal that I use is this one. Oh, and actually this is something else to point out. I know a lot of people, when they are tarot journaling, are afraid to sort of like spend money on the journal which they use, because they're afraid that if the journal is too nice, then they won't want to write in it, and they don't want to make mistakes in it because it's too pristine looking. I don't really follow that. In fact, it's helped me spend some money on journals, because if I've spent money on them, then I'm much more likely to use them and not just let them sit there and languish. So that's kind of the logic that I have. So most of these are, I mean, they're not terribly expensive journals. They're like, you know, the nicer journals at Barnes and Noble, but still, I mean, they're nice for my budget, a student budget, and so that's why I've gone with what I have. So the first one is this one. It's got a little lion. I think it's made of some sort of faux leather, or maybe real leather. I think it was something like $40, so hopefully it's leather. So anyway, it's got this lion on the front, which I really enjoyed because I'm a Leo. And so this is my main journal that I use. I use it for 3 different purposes. The first, about third of the journal, is just general notes. So things about the elements, things about the suits, about numbers, and then just random topics like reversals and things like that. I don't really use reversals, but there's a section in there on them in case I ever need to reference them. So general notes about tarot that I find useful, general ideas which I write down. And then the second half is a listing of each card in the 78 card deck. So each card has 2 pages dedicated to it in the journal. You can kind of flip to the center. You can sort of see, and this is where I keep track of meanings. So meanings which I found other places which resonate with me, meanings which I've sort of come up with on my own through practice and things like that. So it's my system, basically. I guess you call it my system of meanings are kept in there. And then the back of the book is actually, we can flip to there, let's see. Obviously I haven't filled out a lot of it, but the back of the book is spreads that I have found to be useful, that I want to remember. So that's basically, this is sort of like the archive of the work that I do in relation to the tarot here. And that is to be contrasted with the next journal which I use, which is this one. Also, I mean, you can tell it's also from Barnes & Noble. It has that sort of same look to it, but it's green, and it's kind of a tougher leather than the other one is, and it's got a fleur-de-lis rather than a lion. This is the journal that I use in relation to readings. So when I actually do a reading, I keep track of it in this journal, as opposed to this journal, which is the archive. This journal is the personal readings that I do. And so I keep them in a separate place, and I write out the question that I'm asking and the cards themselves, and then any reflection about what I think that it means. And then usually if I figure out what it means later, I'll go back and write in and kind of repair or compare. And I think what's really useful about this is if you keep track of your meanings, you can, or your readings, excuse me, you can go back and see sort of like over the past year kinds of patterns that things were coming up in your life, the kinds of meanings that you made versus at the beginning of the year versus the meanings that you made maybe of the very same cards at the end of the year, that sort of thing. Oh, and actually, one thing I forgot to mention before is something that I do to try and make my journals a little bit special is I like to put some sort of quotation at the beginning of each of them. And I guess you could consider this something similar to like, I know that there are some people who follow Wicca, for example, who have a Book of Shadows, and they will put a book blessing in it on the very first page. So I guess it's kind of similar to that, but again, I'm not a very metaphysical person or mystical person when it comes to the tarot. So I just like putting in a little, what I'm calling an epigraph, for two reasons. First, because I think it personalizes the process, and second, because it makes good use of these annoying first little pages in journals that, see, you like pull it up and it doesn't even lay very flat. So a good way of using that first page, I have a little epigraph at the beginning of each one. So, for example, back to the archive. This is the epigraph that I have here. It's from the poem The Wasteland by T.S. Eliot, which is an incredibly long poem. It's the second stanza. It says, I don't know if you can see it on the camera, but it says, Madame Sosterus, famous clairvoyant, had a bad cold. Nevertheless, is known to be the wisest woman in Europe, with a wicked pack of cards. Here, said she, is your card, the drowned Phoenician sailor. Those are pearls that were his eyes. Look. Here is Belladonna, the lady of the rocks, the lady of situations. Here is the man with 3 stabs, and here the wheel, and here is the one-eyed merchant, and this card which is blank is something he carries on his back, which I am forbidden to see. I do not find the hanged man. Fear death by water. It's always just been a poem that I have enjoyed, and it references the tarot, even though it takes some liberties with its structure, so that is the one that I have there. And then the epigraph that I have at the beginning of my book on readings is actually from a Twilight Zone episode. I really enjoy the Twilight Zone, and so this is from an episode called Nick of Time. This is one of the 2 William Shatner episodes of the Twilight Zone, and this is actually dialogue. Basically, the gist of the story is that a couple is having their car being fixed in a small town, and they're at a diner, and they start to play with a fortune-telling machine, and the man starts to believe that it's true because every time he asks a question and then gets a fortune, the fortune comes true, and it starts to disturb his wife. And so she says to him, when she gets angry at him at the end of the episode, I'm not talking about that machine anymore. I'm talking about you. Are you just going to sit there and let that thing run your life? And then William Shatner says, run my life? Run my life? And she responds, well, isn't that exactly what you're letting it do? Dawn, it made you call the office before. It made you stay here instead of leave. It made you afraid to walk down the street, and now it's telling you when you're going to leave. Why, it's as if every superstitious feeling you've ever had is wrapped up in that one machine. It doesn't matter whether it can foretell the future. What matters is whether you believe more in luck and in fortune than you do in yourself. You can decide your own life. You have a mind, a wonderful mind. Don't destroy it trying to justify that cheap penny fortune machine to yourself. So I like to keep that in this book because I think it's an important check on the kinds of things that I do with tarot. It's easy to get swept up in tarot and to follow it all the time, and so I put that there to remind myself that at the end of the day, it's not just telling me what to do. I have the option and the choice and the ability to decide my own thing. So I just put that there as kind of a warning. Not a warning, that's too serious. It's kind of a reminder. This is the 3rd journal that I use. This one is actually from Borders, not Barnes & Noble. But, and I don't know if you can see it, it's got this sort of image of 2 astrologers looking at the night sky and the elliptical of the zodiac. This journal I use, as opposed to daily or sort of trivial, everyday sorts of readings, this journal I use to keep track of monthly readings. So at the beginning of every month I do just a very short 2-card reading about what is going to be the major theme of the month, and then what is the big challenge of the month to sort of do. I've never been very good at doing daily readings. Sometimes people do that, like, what's going to happen in my day? I don't have the time for that. So instead, I keep track of monthly readings in this book. And I also do my yearly readings, I guess. So this is kind of my time-based readings at the beginning of every year, sort of as a transitional moment between one year and the next, and the meanings that can be associated with that. And then each month I do an entry in relation to that month. So I thought it was appropriate, since the image has this sort of, was the notion, the elliptical of the zodiac, meaning the passage of time and things like that, that it would be good. So a separate journal just for those kind of readings. And then I have this journal. See, it just never ends. I have this journal for, what is it catching? Oh, it's catching a picture above me. That's funny. This journal is for everything else. It's a catch-all journal. It's got a mirror on the front. You can see this nice little reflective mirror. And the metaphor is painfully obvious, but this is for reflections. This is for all sorts of things. So I do like deck interviews, which is kind of a weird term for it, and I'll make a video about that later, but those go in here. And there's a book called The Back in Time tarot book, which is an interesting method. So these are just like explorations of the cards, ruminations, ideas that are not that aren't just readings, but other ways of exploring the tarot. Oh, and actually, I forgot to read you my little epigraph on this one. So, wait, the epigraph that I have on this one is from Tom Robbins, Skinny Legs and All, which is one of my favorite authors, and it says, "For a person has not only perceptions, but a will to perceive, not only a capacity to observe the world, but a capacity to alter his or her observation of it, which, in the end, is the capacity to alter the world itself." So I thought that that was very appropriate. Again, sort of checking the notion of free will against the notion of determinism that sometimes can get swept up in the tarot, but also appropriate because for a time-based kind of book, or a book about readings based in time, how one's perceptions makes one's life seemed appropriate. And so this one, which is just general reflections, ideas, methods. This is kind of the most journal-y of all the journals I have, that I guess. The one where if I don't have any other place to put it, I put it in here. The epigraph that I have is from Shirley Jackson's The Haunting of Hill House, which is a really spooky story if you haven't read it, but it says, "No live organism can continue for long to exist sanely under conditions of absolute reality. Even larks and katydids are supposed by some to dream." This is actually the very first line in the novel, and so I thought it was appropriate in a defense of dreaming to put that in my reflections book. So that is that one, sort of everything that it doesn't. Look at the mirror, catches all sorts of things. That sounds kind of foreboding. So anyway, this is my catch-all journal for all sorts of things, just ruminations and on the cards themselves. And then, if that was not enough, I have one more. And it's the plainest of the bunch, and that's for a very functional reason. This is my travel journal. This is the journal that I use when I'm going places, when maybe I'll go, you know, someplace for a couple weeks at a time, and so I don't want to bring this huge thing with me on the plane. It takes up extra room in a backpack or things like that. This is a little bit more compact. Still nice, it's still leather. But I take this with me because it's compact and it doesn't look as gaudy in case TSA goes through my bag. So what I'll do is, if I do readings on the go, I will do it and record it in this journal, and then when I get home, it gets transferred into this journal to keep everything kind of in one place. So this journal doesn't see the light of day very often, but it's still very useful for me. And it doesn't have an epigraph on it because it's not really a part of the others. It's just functional more than part of the archive, I guess you could say. So those are my journals. Let's look at them again. When you spend money on your journals, maybe, I guess this is probably the most time they've ever really seen out. So that's them. This is how I keep track of my tarot meanings. And this is, again, what works for me. This is the system that I've developed. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's the right system for you, but hopefully it's given you some ideas to how you might start developing your own journal system. This is One-Eyed Merchant signing out. I haven't come up with a better way of signing off yet. Oh, and did you notice that in this book, from the Madame Sosteress poem, that's the reference to my YouTube name. The One-Eyed Merchant is one of the cards, the fictitious cards that she sees in there. So anyway, now you've learned a little bit more about me. And I will see you next time. Bye.